Let's retweet this. And let's retweet this. And get that out of the way there. Let me see if I can move this just a little bit so I can see my chat. Let's see if the chat actually does connect. Just a little bit longer here. And we'll get this started up in just a minute, guys. I'm seeing some action there. And now we're just going to wait to see. Get that up there. Okay, good. All right. I think this means we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tech fans of all shapes, sizes, sorts, and persuasions, welcome to another Monday morning tech chat show on the SGGQA podcast channel. I, of course, am Juan Carlos Bagnell, the SomeGadgetGuy, the SGG of the SGGQA. And the QA stands for the fact that this is a sort of an interactive podcast. I like getting that question and answer kind of flow going as we talk about news stories. The Monday morning tech chat is all about diving a little deeper, if we can, into news stories that I feel may have slipped through the cracks or deserve a little bit more attention. And why we do the show on a Monday is because we probably got through news during the week. And while we get to the end of the week, a lot of news stories blow up. But then we got to take some time. We got to go back. We actually have to examine what happened. Seeing some people already jumping into the live chat on the YouTube. Steve DeRoche, Fat Produce, Andrew Wallace, The Nitpicker, Demir Frank. All right. We've got a lot of topics to get through, and I'm going to try and keep my voice intact. Steve DeRoche, interaction is the name of the game. I agree. I hope everyone had a wonderful The Big Game Day yesterday. Trademark, copyright, registered, whatever. I don't know. We can say superb owl on a podcast without getting sued. We're going to be talking about YouTube copyright, so, like maybe I'll be careful and not say any brand names or talk about any licensed IP or copyrighted information, because it's getting pretty dicey out there. It's getting pretty rough. For it, I'm only here to see Juan's derpy face when the stream goes fooked. I'm expecting that at some point something will happen. I did a stream with TK last week, and I didn't even know it got interrupted, but the streaming software just went, okay, well, we're just gonna keep streaming, and like set up a whole second stream. And that's always such a huge pain in the butt for managing YouTube, having a part 1 of a video and a part 2 of a video, and it's such a mess. And I really wanted to go and fix it, and I just couldn't stomach fixing it. But yes, yesterday, Super Bowl, we for my group of friends, we had our chili cook-off competition, which I believe I won. That's CHILI versus CHILE cook-off, because I always make a green chili stew, while a friend of mine always makes sort of more of a Texan-style chili. But I think I came out on top with pork and hominy. So pork, hominy, green chili, and some potatoes with some pinto beans. It was pretty delicious. My daughter ate her weight in mac and cheese. And unfortunately, on the drive home, a little 3-year-old up way past her bedtime, stomach overfull. Some of that mac and cheese kind of exploded into the back of my car, which was super gross. But we'll laugh about that someday. Today is not that day, but it will be funny at some point. Today is not that point. But yeah, so I hope everyone had fun, happy, safe. If you're inclined to celebrate this type of communal, it's an American holiday, or close enough. So hopefully you guys had a good time. I thought the game was super underwhelming. The commercials weren't that fun. I actually scheduled a tweet. I scheduled a tweet like 4 months ago. I was mildly inebriated while hanging out at an industry event. And just like, oh, yeah, that'd be kind of a funny thing to tweet. Like the Super Bowl. That would be a funny thing to tweet for the Super Bowl. And so while still mildly inebriated, I scheduled a tweet in Hootsuite. Like, when is the Super Bowl? Oh, it is February 3rd. I know what I'll do. I'll tweet this thing and it'll be hilarious and everyone will think I'm super funny. And so I start getting notifications of people are liking and retweeting this thing, and I had completely forgotten that I had scheduled that. So that was like good drunk Juan moment of like, hey, look at that. And it wasn't actually the tweet was very appropriate for the game, because what I tweeted was, it's a shame both teams could score so many more points if they just worked together, which, again, not the best joke. It's kind of hack, but while I was drunk, I thought that was really funny. And then started getting people like, yeah, that's so funny. And then, the score was like 3-0 when I tweeted that, or when it was scheduled to tweet. So it was pretty good. It was all right. I think that's enough talking about the Super Bowl. From Aditya Anil, I downloaded the TK Bay collab since the internet is kind of spotty. We'll watch some other videos on the channel to get you that sweet, sweet ad revenue. Well, thank you very much, Aditya. I appreciate it. Steve DeRoche, I'm here for the cracked camera sensor, because that's what you see right there. Because I have so much to shoot. I couldn't even spare the time. I was up early this morning. I was shooting some stuff for a video that's under embargo. I had to flip the table just to recreate a shot. I'm gonna have to flip it back to do another hosted part, where I actually talk to camera, and like just the idea of unscrewing the camera plate for my tripod head was just like, no, I can't. So at some point I'm gonna have to replace the Samsung, but it still mostly works. And I kind of like my little foggy crack up in the corner there. It's hilarious. From Andrew Wallace, my favorite thing about the Super Bowl this year is that I didn't watch it. I had a lot of family and friends in that boat too. Even my sister, whose husband is like super into football. She like, nah, I'm gonna read a book. So like, I think she still got snacks and stuff, and it was like, I'm just gonna read a book and eat snacks. So that was pretty good. And yeah, so that's just a tease, because we do have a lot of stuff coming up on the channel, and I'm like crazy behind schedule on a bunch of videos that I wanted to get done. I've got 4 videos shot right now. I'm still waiting for the weather to clear in Los Angeles long enough for me to finish up some camera samples on the Razer phone. I'm almost done. I need like maybe even just one more day of sunshine, and I think I can collect all of the last samples that I need to kind of wrap up the analysis on the Razer camera. But yeah, so we've got some cool stuff coming, and some stuff that I can't talk about just yet. And then I'm also retooling. We're still retooling at Newegg, but it's looking like we'll be in studio the end of the month. So we'll be back in studio, like actually producing stuff the end of the month. So some Newegg stuff is coming down the pipe too, which is which should be pretty great. But let's jump into some news. We've got a lot of news. Steve DeRoche, I guess my favorite thing of the Super Bowl was the backlash of the halftime show. Well, first of all, I saw a lot of jokes about people taking a knee. Just again, there have been lots of controversies about what relationship football and art and music should all have together. The Avengers trailer, Aditya Anil, that's definitely. Hey, Ed Modlin saying, what is up? What's up, Ed? But then also just the huge Reddit fervor of pitchforks that they didn't get as much SpongeBob as they wanted. I'm not surprised that we didn't get much SpongeBob, or that they actually didn't play. I mean, it would have been sweet if Maroon 5 had played Sweet Victory, but I don't know that any of us should have been surprised that didn't happen. Disappointed, but not surprised. Sort of like the main talking point for a lot of things over the last couple of years. Disappointed, but not surprised. All right, news. Let's get to news. News. Newsy news. My screen share isn't working. There it goes. Okay, so the first thing I want to touch on, a little Black Mirror situation for us. This is by way of the Wall Street Journal. I've got this linked in the show notes. New York insurers can evaluate your social media use if they can prove why it's needed, from the first 2 paragraphs. This is from Leslie Schism. I hope that's how you pronounce her name, a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. New York's top financial regulator is going to allow life insurers to use data from social media and other non-traditional sources when setting premium rates, though the insurers will have to prove the information doesn't unfairly discriminate against certain customers. New York is the first state to set specific guidance governing how life insurers use algorithms to comb through everything from home ownership records to credit scores and internet use in an effort to size up an applicant's risk. At least, and then it goes on to say about at least a couple dozen insurers are looking to use advanced data and metrics. That should be that should be a little freaky if you're inclined to put on tinfoil hats occasionally, like I am, and should also give further support to the idea that maybe we should not be documenting every single aspect of our life on public forums that generate revenue by monetizing our behavior, selling that data off to other companies that are not under the strictest of regulations, and then that can be sold to companies that can data mine and apply other rates on products and services that may or may not affect us, like life insurance. And then eventually, if this works for life insurance, probably everything else that we have to sort of manage or meter in any kind of protective service or response service like car insurance or health insurance or anything like that. I have to find this one part of the article. Because right now it's not a lot of companies are admitting. Actually, I think only one is admitting that they're actively using it. But of course, every single insurance company is like, oh, well, yes, we are totally examining the situation. If it garners good results for our shareholders, of course, we'd have some strategy that we might employ to use this kind of guidance. Hold on. Only one insurer out of the 160 said it was using social media, retail purchases, or internet activities in underwriting, according to a person familiar with the department's findings. So not only just social media, not only what their what do you call an insurance subscriber? I don't know what the customer, but also their retail purchases and other internet activities. Again, as soon as you sort of give up any of that kind of open behavior for any type of platform, it's gonna come back to you. You not only is privacy completely dead, but now we have to expect that this behavior is being monitored. And even if we pretend like it's some kind of activity in aggregate, like, well, this community of people tend to engage in this kind of risk, so we're going to affix these types of policies to that demographic, that, we're splitting hairs at some point. At some point, you just have to admit, like, when I post that dumb, shot of me, like, drinking heavily on Facebook, that behavior is now going to start impacting other aspects of our life. So that's hilarious. From Aditya Anil, ooh, my internet history. Pretty sure all the insurance agency has to do is message the Zuck and give him my IP address. And maybe not even that. From Abraham Artemis, it looks like the subtle version of China's rating for its citizens. It absolutely does. I mean, if you've been following some of these stories that we've been talking about on this podcast, that was number one, the first thing that I thought of. We're not going to have the same type of public authoritarian structure as China does in trying to keep citizenry in line. We're going to have a little bit more of the Brave New World entertainment bread and circuses style of affecting the population. So it's not going to start immediately the same way, but credit ratings, insurance ratings, these things are all going to start being factored into the decision-making process for how you get a loan. If you're more at risk for abusing a credit card, how do you get a car? What did you pay for in school? What was your degree in? All of that information is being kind of stapled together. And to think that companies won't try to find ways to leverage this would be extremely naive. And Viper's in the chat, just dropping fire, just literally, just fire after fire after fire. David, gonna be hilarious when those companies try that in the EU and get fined for violating privacy laws. And I would absolutely hope that the EU, this would be something that the EU tackles as one of their consumer protection ideas. I think there needs to be that, like, that wall of obfuscation, you know? There's so much that goes into crafting a policy or attaching products and services to insurance. You know, you start to wonder, like, if there is a future where this can survive as a private industry without it becoming extremely prejudicial, because it's built on tracking data, managing risk, and utilizing all of that information to highlight people who might be high risk and trying to keep them from eating up any potential profits. You know, that from the capitalist perspective, from the business perspective, it's, you need to offer a great product, but you also kind of need to make sure that as few people use it as possible. So this is extremely difficult territory to navigate, and I think the EU's more current stance on data, digital privacy, it should probably weigh into this discussion too. From Steve DeRoche, we should be back to advocating for internet anonymity. And again, that's a double-edged sword too. Anonymity also creates some of the most toxic and hostile environments that we have in terms of discourse. You know, I would say, depending on how risky your individual behaviors are, maybe you should be looking at offsetting some of that risk by trying to minimize the amount of public information you put out there. I feel like my current risk is pretty low, and right now I'm kind of in all of the safety zone demographics for, you know, been married for a while, I have a kid, been trying to lose weight, you know, I work in a professional industry where I talk about digital health and minimizing all that. But then again, I have no idea. I have zero idea how the rest of my public persona and public information might be leveraged against me in some kind of, you know, I've talked about my healthcare issues. I've talked about having psoriasis. That's a pre-existing condition, and now that would have to be weighed in on some other, you know, conversation like automobile insurance or life insurance. So yeah, it's extremely messy, and I don't feel like there's one good solution. But I will say, I think that having a broader conversation and hopefully a more instructive education on media literacy and digital health is probably long overdue for the up-and-coming generation of consumers. Viper throwing some shade at Apple. Not sure why Apple thinks a $770 refurb iPhone 10 is a deal when a new iPhone 10R can be had for $750. We're going to talk a little bit about Apple, but we probably won't touch too much on the individual phones. Viper, captain of Team Apple, it's getting kind of rough just to be like an acolyte, you know? Like, I feel we all have our own individual criticisms of the companies that we like doing business with the most. From Vanch Sani, EU is there protecting privacy to an extent. Then we have United States, no more net neutrality, and ISPs can sell your internet history. And technically, they can still dump your location data. And we're gonna actually, no, I don't think this week we have any too hard stories about that. But yeah, it's something we've talked about in the past on previous episodes of the podcast, where there's been a lot of corporatism surrounding the monetization and the weaponization of consumer data and social media, and the United States feels like it's a couple years behind the curve in trying to untangle what the legal relationships and the regulations should look like in this type of an economy. From David at Aditya Anil, the EU doesn't really care about preserving European companies. Heck, they allowed Nokia to be reduced to shambles, so it won't have any effect on that. Actually, it's because of situations like how Nokia was decimated during that Microsoft buyout year that I think the EU has actually gotten more aggressive about those individual consumer protections. Who's doing business with who owns what label, who's licensing what information. I think I don't always agree with the steps they're taking, and I think some of them when it comes to copyright and media are very ham-fisted, but their politicians have been way more exciting in at least joining the conversation, whereas here in the United States, they've just been burying their heads in the sand, saying, "Oh, we should go back to oil." Like, I feel like, I'd much rather have a body of elected officials at least trying to be present and on the pulse. Because there's another story we're going to talk about, like gambling and video games. And it's a story that doesn't come from the United States. We're not at the tip of the spear. We're not leading the way on trying to improve the situation. We're waiting for someone in Europe to figure it out for us. So, again, it's a trend that I'm not very happy to see executed here in the United States. It's a trend that I'm very disappointed in, that our elected officials seem woefully undereducated on these types of topics. From Fat Produce, I'm interested to see the same things that happened to Apple in sales happen to the Galaxy S10 with their ludicrous pricing. Did you see that ludicrous display last night? I'll be interested to see too, but I don't know that it's, again, it's we can blame pricing, but I also feel like a major component of this is just the commoditization of the smartphone. I don't know that anyone really has solved that situation. We're all just kind of floating the same glowing rectangles and glass on glass designs, and they do things a little bit better than the generation before. But if you were on anything Qualcomm 820 powered and up, you actually have still a respectably powerful pocket computer that, if it were still receiving good software maintenance, and if there was a system in place to provide those gadgets good hardware maintenance, screen replacements, battery replacements, failing logic boards, just the same way that we can service old laptops, there's nothing holding you back from making it through your day, not only just covering the basics, but doing some pretty advanced mobile computing on phones that came out in 2016. So it's harder and harder to say, oh, well, yeah, your phone works perfectly fine, or it would work perfectly fine if we gave you better updates. But you should really buy this new one, which is like $400 more than the one that you bought that still could be working just fine. Or especially like if you follow Apple, man, those Forbes articles really highlighting all of the nasty surprises in the iOS software updates. There was another article that I shared with Viper today. It's hilarious how often that phrase gets used at Forbes. From LB Burton Sr. on Periscope. Hello, Juan. I enjoyed you on Viper live last week. I had a lovely conversation with Mr. Viper, talking about some of the trends that we saw in mobile computing, and I loved being on his stream, and I'm going to try and get him on this podcast to do a creator chat, because I think he's got one of the most fun takes on tech commentary that I've seen in a long while. Let's see. From Aditya Anil. Okay, the Twitch stream is slightly ahead of the YouTube stream. Don't read this out loud. You're only streaming on YouTube. I couldn't help it. And Viper chiming in. LMAO Forbes. Yeah, I've not been very impressed with their quality of clickbait tech reporting. Let's move on to a couple other news. This one's got a little more of a political lean to it. It's something that I think we're all kind of disappointed on. From Sup Mushroom Soup on Periscope. Watching this on a Galaxy S7 running a Pi custom ROM, I never feel it slow down to an annoying level. Galaxy S7 is such great hardware, and that phone I feel was tragically ignored, just awfully ignored by Samsung for quality of life improvements. My wife used one for almost a year, and when I went to use it at near the end of that year, it was unusably slow. Like, I would wonder, like, why don't you ever fire up your camera, take pictures of her daughter? What's going on? You know, like, you've got a phone and it's a pretty good phone. And just the combination of apps and services that she was running and using it to manage medical stuff and putting all that stuff together, just the phone was awful. I mean, like, again, just locking up and lagging and crashing and just in a terrible state. We wiped it out and it was working a little bit better for a while. She got a Moto G5 and the Moto G5 just destroyed it in terms of just daily lifestyle use. And that's never a good look for premium manufacturers when you can pick up a cheap ass phone and it kind of covers all of the same daily use, about the same as a phone that costs ridiculously more. Again, why I'm very disappointed in the state of conversation about flagship phones from tech reviewers. Because it's like, tech reviewers are still reviewing phones as if phones struggle to cover the basics. You're like, no, if you're going to spend upwards of $800 on a premium device, then we need to know what kind of $800 worth of use we can get out of it. Not, well, it's got a great Geekbench score. Like, that means nothing. It's ridiculous. All right, let's get on. Let's cover our news, because I get sidetracked way too easy because you guys are fun to talk to. All right, this one was just disappointing. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but Foxconn may not build a $10 billion Wisconsin plant that Trump touted. This is coming by way of NBC News. This is from last week. Foxconn is reconsidering plans to make advanced liquid crystal displays at a $10 billion Wisconsin campus, and said it intends to hire mostly engineers and researchers rather than the manufacturing workforce the project originally promised. I have to scroll down lower into this because, first of all, hold on. Here's the part of the article. The Foxconn project was championed by former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, a Republican, who helped secure around $4 billion in tax breaks and other incentives before leaving office. Critics of the deal, including a number of Democrats, called it a corporate giveaway that would never result in the promised manufacturing jobs and posed serious environmental risks. Flash forward to now-ish. Earlier this month, Foxconn, a major supplier to Apple, reiterated its intention to create 13,000 jobs in Wisconsin, but said it had slowed its pace of hiring. The company initially said it expected to employ about 5,200 people by the end of 2020. That's less than half of their promised commitment to 13,000 jobs. A company source said that figure now looks to be closer to 1,000 workers, which is also far short of the 13,000 jobs that they promised. It is unclear when the full 13,000 workers will be hired, but Wu in the interview said about 3/4 of Foxconn's eventual jobs will be in R&D and design, what he described as knowledge positions, rather than blue-collar manufacturing jobs. Oh, man. So, I wanted to touch on this story from this article right here, because shortly after this article was published, there was another meeting where Foxconn, again, reasserted that they were going to be bringing manufacturing positions, but there is no concrete timeline on when or how. So I would still be somewhat skeptical of a company like Foxconn making an assembly line in the United States that can compete price-wise against assembly lines in other parts of the world, and really bringing an additional 12,000 jobs to that sector at those costs with these prices after they're abandoning things like TV manufacturing here in the United States. So what are they going to make? What are they going to assemble? Because if you've ever been on a gadget assembly line, that is brutal work. That is brutal, repetitive, claustrophobic work. Far and away, like different than what I've ever seen from an automobile manufacturing line. So I'm sure Foxconn is waging a PR battle right now to shift course, but I'd be very cool. Oh, actually, AV Room has a link right here from NBC News. Hold on, let me pull this up too. Open a new window, move this tab over. pull this in here. It's loading right now. We're going to read a little bit of this. Because I'll be very surprised. I will be very pleased if there are different numbers that are actually in place. So here we go. Foxconn in a statement confirmed that Trump and Gao had a personal conversation about the Wisconsin Valley Science and Technology Park that is currently under construction in the town of Mount Pleasant. The project garnered more than $4 billion in tax breaks from former Governor Scott Walker, Republican and his GOP allies, enticements that Democrats and other critics announced giving away to another firm. Under the initial agreement, Foxconn promised to hire 13,000 workers, the majority of whom would build advanced TV screens at the plant. But a furor erupted Wednesday. I don't know that word. Furor? Wednesday, when another top company official named Louis Wu, in an interview with Reuters, blindsided Trump and the other project supporters by announcing the company was rethinking its plans. On Friday, however, the company issued the statement apparently aimed at quelling concerns with an assertion that it is moving forward with plans to build an advanced manufacturing facility. It said that the project would include a liquid crystal module back-end packaging plant and a high-precision molding factory. This campus will serve both as an advanced manufacturing facility as well as a hub or high-technology innovation for the region, Foxconn said. The company did not specify how many of the 13,000 promised jobs would be available, would be the blue-collar kind that Trump and So no, none of this has really changed. Again, this campus will serve as both an advanced manufacturing facility as well as a hub or high-technology innovation for the region, which is very much in line with the previous statement that they're starting with a crew of engineers and thinkers and white-collar jobs, that none of this really asserts or demonstrates their commitment to manufacturing, assembly, or packaging jobs for the beginnings of their investment in this area. So thank you. Actually, AV Room, thank you for sending me this article as a follow-up. But this is just the PR speak from Foxconn. This gives us no concrete information. This gives us no actual path, no path towards fulfilling this commitment to this area in Wisconsin, and is really just the same kind of PR speak that we would expect from a humongous multinational corporation that is looking at how to maximize the investment and tax breaks that they got from an area while putting in as little commitment as possible. I would still be very surprised if Foxconn manages any kind of manufacturing or assembly job line at any scale here in the United States. I hope I am wrong there. It would be nice if we could retool areas of Detroit. It would be nice if we could retool areas throughout the Midwest that have these populations of people that have an expertise in manufacturing and getting them to work in more high-tech endeavors. I would be very happy to see that type of manufacturing rebirth, renaissance here in the United States. You'll pardon if I'm skeptical of that coming from Foxconn. I want to be proven wrong about the perception of their company. I am not putting a lot of faith, nor will I be holding my breath that they will do business to the level of work dignity that I hope we can reestablish here in the United States. Sorry, you guys are Frid. But seriously, why do you believe words from a fox? Fox in the henhouse, man. All kinds of good puns there. Eric Chug, manufacturing positions are never coming back to America, sadly. I feel if we in the United States could have broader conversations about human and work dignity, and if we could educate our consumers better about prices and costs as they pertain or relate to the dignity of labor, that there's the potential for jobs, these types of jobs, to blossom here in the United States. I lived through eras of our economy where that made in the USA label meant pride and meant quality and meant consistency. And I feel we could get back to that. I feel like that's not a left-leaning issue. That's not a right-leaning issue. That's I mean, it's got that little bit of jingoism attached to it, but we could make it mean something again. I think I would feel better about paying over $1,000 for a regular smartphone if I knew that a part of that cost was I paid $1,000 for a phone that was made in a safe environment and that contributed to things like an employee's healthcare and pension or healthcare and retirement. That the person who helped to make the people who helped to make those phones went home to places where they could live and put food on the table for their families. As opposed to, I'm paying $1,000 for a phone with an insane profit margin because we're exploiting labor in a very undignified fashion. It's kind of like I used to get really upset about gas. Like I wanted to be able to roll up to a gas station and see this gas came from Canada. This gas came from Saudi Arabia. The Canadian gas is a little bit more expensive, but I could vote with my wallet to do business with the organizations and the regions of the world that I most wanted to support with my dollar. But instead, gas just gets kind of dumped into one big bucket and kind of stirred up and then spread out all over again, and you have no idea, who's actually profiting from your dollar. That's what I would like to see as a part of a manufacturing revolution. Because if part of the conversation centers on that notion of human dignity and labor dignity, then no one can really beat first world countries with manufacturing jobs. Because we'll have safety protocols, we'll have safe working environments, healthier working environments. Increasingly, I doubt that there would be any perfectly safe or perfectly healthy manufacturing work environment. But I think we would do that better. And that we would also have labor with dignity, with proper support and proper social services and proper healthcare and everything else. Now I'm just kind of repeating myself here. But yes, AV Room, thank you for sending that my way. And it kind of just reinforcing why we should be skeptical of Foxconn's move into Wisconsin. I don't want to make it just, the GOP, but Scott Walker, I don't believe, was really acting in the best interests of the citizenry of Wisconsin. From Sup, Mushroom Soup, but what sort of working conditions would there be? We all know how Foxconn works in China. That's exactly why I feel we should take the lead in this type of manufacturing again, because I feel we would have better oversight. We would make way more noise if people were being abused or mistreated, and we would have, we don't have a strong labor movement here in the United States, but I still feel like we would join the conversation more aggressively than the citizens of a country like China. From L Chamber, the general public suck about dignity. They only think about their pockets. That's why I feel it would, I'm not so, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying my notion of educating consumers and empowering them to respect dignity and labor is an easy educational battle. It is extremely difficult. But I don't know. I've been shown time and time again that despite political differences, despite philosophical differences, ethical differences, Americans as a people, by and large, still tend to mostly do the right thing when you really put them to task. When their neighbors are hurting, when people are hungry, when shelters are down, we see this across the board. Someone steps up and becomes and makes their community a neighborhood. Someone puts homeless people in hotels. Someone opens their door and lets a victim of the recent fires here in California sleep on their couch. And we get pretty good at spreading that message too. Do you need help? We can help you. And that little germ of an idea, I feel, can be nurtured and can grow. I am still an idealist when it comes to those kinds of conversations. But, I was raised on, I was raised on old school Mr. Rogers. Look for the helpers. Whenever there's something scary that happens, there will always be a helper. And that's how I'm endeavoring to raise my daughter that way. And that if you don't see a helper, then it's on you. That you are going to be the helper. I'm an Eagle Scout. That's how I was raised. That's how I'm going to raise my family. And I feel there are way more people in this country who aspire to be the neighbor than they do the abuser or the leech. And we can survive a few leeches in our society and still help way more people. But we've got to kind of drop this pretense of outright cynicism, especially fostered by our elected officials, because I have zero faith in their ability to actually campaign on this type of message again. We have huge problems that need to be solved that, this elected official process is going to be stretched to an inch of its life. But that also means that us down on the ground in our communities, in our neighborhoods, need to take up the reins of being responsible for our neighbors and being our neighbors' keepers. From Eric Chug, why can't we get that from the media that Americans are at heart good? We try to help each other. I don't know, man. I think the media largely being owned by extremely corporate interests, it's very difficult for a message like that to break through the consumerism and the doom and gloom and the fear spreading, because that keeps eyeballs on screens. It keeps people in their homes. It keeps them consuming, as opposed to turning off the TV to go and check on their neighbors. The media, regardless if it's liberal or conservative, and I don't think it's both sides have problems. I feel like right-leaning media has a much bigger problem right now than left-leaning media, but left-leaning media still contributes to a problem of divisiveness and fear-mongering. And it's very hard to find outlets. Like, our morning routine in my household is sort of evenly split up between Reuters and AP news feeds, local publicly funded radio like KCRW, and then also we mix in some BBC World News. And that's about as much as we can handle in terms of news that will shock you. And that's pretty low key. Like, I have zero stomach for talking heads yelling at me from opinion bubbles in a grid on a, like, again, I think you guys would assume I am extremely left leaning in a lot of my political and economic views, but MSNBC, they do not speak for me. So they are a poor representation of what more liberal and progressive people actually want to see happen or see change in their daily lives. Moving on. I didn't mean to get sort of so tied into a political discussion there. If anything, it's just I get that hopefulness when I get to spend a night out with friends and my daughter's there with us, and it's just like there's this cozy, warm home while we're all eating way too much food. It's sort of like our second Thanksgiving. We've been doing this for years, this chili cook-off. And you leave the night just feeling so refreshed, and you're reminded, like, oh, people care about me, and I care about people. And, like, you got a few friends that disagree on some things, but we don't feel like we're trying to destroy the country because we don't all share the same views in lockstep. And it would be nice to spread that message around. It sucks that it comes from a football game, but if that's what it takes to bring us together for a night to be like, cool, and everything's groovy and we can be pals, then that's what it takes. Here, moving right along. Another story. I said we were gonna talk about this a little bit because I feel like we need to keep checking in on this kind of story. And I'm very excited by Belgium sticking to their guns as it pertains to video games. Let me take a drink of water from a delicious coffee mug here real quick. I'm going to have to do an ASMR podcast at some point just to drive myself nuts because ASMR is terrible. All right. From Eurogamer.net. This is from Wesley Yin Poole, the deputy editor. EA buckles in Belgium and stops selling FIFA points following loot box gambling pressure. From the article, EA has announced plans to stop selling FIFA points in Belgium following government pressure over loot boxes. In FIFA Ultimate Team, you can spend real-world money on FIFA points, which can then be used to buy card packs. In September 2018, the Belgian government, which had declared loot boxes to be a form of gambling, because players don't know exactly which items a box may contain when buying one, launched a criminal investigation into EA after the publisher refused to modify FIFA's randomized card pack loot boxes in order to comply with the country's gambling laws. This is a good article, just kind of, again, summing up to the point where we've gotten at this point. EA's passive-aggressive reply to their community: "We apologize to our players in Belgium for any inconvenience caused by this change." This is a growing worry of mine. EA has been probably most responsible for, I want to use the word like weaponizing, not the right word, but again, exacerbating microtransactions to a point where their company's financials and their commitment to their shareholders depends on an extremely predatory relationship with their player base. Personally, I actually don't have problems with some notion of aggressive random number generating event microtransactions being built into a game in a way which stops player progression. You can't unlock this character or make it past this point in the game unless you throw real world money at what is essentially a slot machine and hope you get the outcome that you desire. But we also publish our rates of payout, just like they do in Vegas. You know, Vegas has a whole commission that has to know what the rates of payout are, and that casinos can't change a slot machine's payout on the fly, because that would be extremely profitable behavior for the casino, but would be really tapping into the most aggressively addictive qualities of something like gambling, like a slot machine payout. There's a lot of pretty good emerging scientific data to suggest that it does not matter if money comes out of a slot machine, or if teddy bears come out of a slot machine, or if FIFA players come out of a slot machine, digital recreations of FIFA soccer players come out of a slot machine. The mechanic that lights up the brain is very much the same, regardless of how that random number generating event is actually executed and what comes out of that random number generating event. If you're going to do that, because I actually philosophically don't have a huge problem with gambling being legal online, but we as a society say, when there is a game that halts player progression or extracts wealth from the player, and the part of the game is rolling the die in a randomized event, we say that that's an adult practice. If EA wants to take every single game of theirs with card packs, loot boxes, gotcha mechanics of any kind, and they want to slap an AO label, adults only, on those kinds of games, I'm fine with that. But I find it to be extremely problematic when we've got sports franchises, when we've got Star Wars family-friendly franchises where you are targeting children as part of the player base to harass their parents to spend money after they've already purchased an expensive AAA title. That's not enough. You bought a Star Wars game, but now if you don't want to grind for years to unlock the characters that you care about the most, then you've got to throw even more money randomly at the screen until we eventually deliver the materials that you need to unlock the player that you care about or the character that you care about. If the video game industry is going to do business that way, unfortunately, that's a situation where elected officials and law enforcement need to get involved. I do not want politicians weighing in on gaming. Remember our previous conversation? Foxconn, elected officials not really representing us well in the digital or technological space. Every single time our politicians have gone up against artists, it's always been in the clumsiest, most ham-fisted, least educated, worst possible outcome for the fan base of that media. Comic books, music, Democrats in music, we did not do that well, right? The film industry, the only thing that makes sense is for the developers and the community of artists who make that media to police themselves in a way where consumers actually know what they're paying for. They know up front what the strings are. If they cannot properly educate consumers, then unfortunately law enforcement and politicians need to get involved. And that's where the video game industry is right now. So many studios are starting to figure out ways out of this. And you look at something like some of the free-to-play games, which do a much better job of handling this type of player interaction. And like, because, you know, I mean, the obvious ones to think of would be like a Fortnite. But I'm way more excited by like Path of Exile. You know, action RPG, darker in tone. It's given me kind of my Diablo fix. And I feel pretty good about kicking them a little cash just to make some quality of life improvements, but I could totally play that game for free, right? If that's an emerging business model and a studio can fund that and they don't worry about shareholders demanding cancerous growth in their financials, that's a developer that I want to support. That's something I'm really excited to see in the gaming industry. And so to that same token, I'm really stoked that Belgium stuck to their guns. That there's been some pretty intense pressure by EA trying to get their fan base, you know, supporting them. They broke Belgium's law. I wish that we had politicians who were looking out for this type of behavior here. And shame on the video game industry for not taking microtransactions into account when giving games ratings. As soon as there is a secondary financial commitment to a game, that needs to impact the rating of the game. You can't say this game is like T for teen when teens likely don't have the disposable income to play the game the way it was built to be played, broken to be paid. That's unconscionable. And especially if it's a game targeted towards younger children where you're training their synapses to expect video game dopamine hits, not based on their skill at completing levels in the game, but at rolling the die. Oh, and it felt so good when I got that thing that I wanted. Yeah, that's little kid gambling. You're basically programming kids to expect payoffs not from storytelling elements or story-driven elements, but random number generating elements. LGH Dotma, I wonder what effect this has on EA's policy in Europe. Belgium is just a small country, but the entire EU Parliament is there as well. What happens there catches the eye of the EU Commission. As far as I understand, and especially from this article right here, this will not affect policy throughout Europe, but will likely stand as precedent for other countries also examining the situation. And LGH Dotma also goes on to say that he agrees with me that loot boxes are basically gambling, because they are. Let's see, from Fabio Bruni, I think if a company are using microtransactions, they are cheating, yes. And then LGH Dotma goes on to say mobile games. Yeah, mobile games are another mess entirely. But then again, I also point most of the blame at, outside of EA making their own games, for mobile games, it's Google and Apple, because they get a cut of every single microtransaction that goes on their platform. So if Google wanted to say, hey, there's this Disney game, but to make it through the game, you've got to buy crystal packs. That game can't be for kids. Then this problem would evaporate on mobile. But no, because Google profits way too much from that. But again, this is also where we need to draw the line between like again, a Path of Exile where it's a microtransaction that's in the game that unlocks, like your inventory. You can play the game in sort of a free taste version. But if you go on Google Play and you look at mobile games, there is no delineation between a game that just has an in-app purchase to unlock the full content of the game, or a game that has in-app purchases that prey on cooldown clocks, restrictions, random number generating events, and other mechanics that halt player progression. And again, if Google were to give parents and just general consumers, I don't even want to make this all about, oh, would someone please think of the children as I clutch my pearls? But any consumer, if they had access to that kind of difference in what the purchases were, not just that there are in-app purchases, but like, oh yeah, you can play the first level of the game for free, and then you give me $5, and then the whole rest of the game is unlocked, and you can go off and play and be happy. Well, that's an in-app purchase just as much as spending $100 on crystals in Marvel Future Fight, which won't even go towards fully unlocking one character. And they've got like 200 characters in the game. That's not okay. So again, I feel like there also needs to be a nicer or more specific granularity. Because, if the microtransactions that you're paying for just like hats and skins and non-game altering mechanics, then I don't care. Charge whatever you want and make a store so that people can trade them and do whatever. But if the mechanics of the game are purposely broken to prevent you from progressing until you throw more money at the screen, then no, you have a bigger problem there. And from Sup Mushroom Soup Sup Mushroom Soup. Mushroom soup sounds delicious right now. It's raining in California. It's really cold and soggy and gray, and that sounds like exactly the kind of soup that would be perfect for snuggling up on a couch right now. I digress. How did Belgium even find out about this? Props to the guys who let the right people know about this. And same thing, there are a handful of elected officials here in the United States that are on the pulse. But this isn't a story or a topic that has really garnered much support politically outside of like, a gamer on Reddit trying to host a podcast about it. Who is it? Is it Chris Lee in Hawaii? He started a YouTube channel just to talk about the process of, how a bill becomes a law. But I don't think he's posted in months. And so he got a little grandstanding in there. He published some highlights from in a game industry meeting. Sort of they were asked to present before elected officials in Hawaii, and then he just kind of disappeared. So it's frustrating. Yeah. Let's move on to another story. How about Nvidia and the sky falling? Anyone down? Are you all rocking your RTX? Am I ray traced right now in your stream? Because that would be really exciting. I would be really happy if that kind of advanced lighting technology was being used to kind of soften the glow on my face and all my psoriasis scars. Nvidia is falling again as analysts bail on once loved stock. This is by CNBC. From the article, shares of Nvidia fell 4.6% Tuesday, adding to their steep losses from the previous session as several analysts bailed on the chipmaker following a dire sales warning. Ooh, spooky. Hold on. From Waris Amir Muhammad, RTX off. Analysts at Morgan Stanley and Needham downgraded the stock. Another analyst at Bank of America Merrill Lynch, and how depressing is that as a name of a business? Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Ugh, removed it from its list of best ideas. It's just financial news is just such a mess right now, especially when it comes to tech. Nvidia dropped 13.8% Monday, its single worst day performance since November 16, after the company slashed its fiscal fourth quarter revenue guidance to $2.2 billion from $2.7 billion. In a statement, Nvidia said that deteriorating macroeconomic conditions, particularly in China, impacted consumer demand for Nvidia gaming GPUs, a key business segment for the company. Continuing from Nvidia, missing the quarter this badly in gaming indicates more significant challenges than we had anticipated, given that this is still a channel fill quarter for mid-range high end. So that's pretty weak. It's kind of, first of all, do we really need to blame China? Isn't that the same thing Apple did when they were like, oh yeah, people aren't buying our $1,000 plus phones. Must be China. So I kind of feel like that as prices have been climbing on these types of products, as the fervor for these types of products have sort of dictated certain tiers at the mid-range and the high end, or these coveted products. And the company, like Nvidia, doesn't try to do the same sort of like lifestyle branding and marketing that a lot of other tech companies do. But there is still sort of a notion of in PC building, whether or not you're using Nvidia products, and you bemoan the lack of competition, but even when there is competition, you still buy Nvidia because reasons. I'm on a GTX 1080 Ti, so I'm definitely a part of that conversation too. But it was literally like at the time I was trying to purchase a Vega, and they were gone. There was no channel for Vega while I was building this current workstation that I'm on right now, and so it was like, I need a powerful GPU. I'm going to be doing some video editing and rendering, and it was 1080 Ti by default because I would have thrown my money to AMD had there been an option to. But I digress again. You had a ton of stock in the channel because you overplayed your hand on crypto. So cryptocurrencies were occupying the GPU market like crazy. That ratcheted up prices to a ridiculous degree. The pricing became woefully and hilariously overinflated. Your core bread and butter consumers sat out. RTX launched. Pricing took another step up the tier, an even higher tier. And then your bread and butter consumers exhausted your pent-up demand for the last generation product. All at, again, at prices that were then falling radically from their inflated highs before. I like that we're seeing some interesting new technologies for gaming. Ray tracing is a way to light video game scenes in a very interesting and novel way that no games are really supporting right now. Maybe a handful of teams are actually supporting right now. And you pay a substantial premium for a technology that you can't really use, and then an increase in performance. It's not like, a GTX 2080 is the same performance, an RTX 2080 is the same performance as a GTX 1080. GTs and RTs and 10s and 20s. So many letters and numbers. But again, I don't know that I can feel too sad for Nvidia. I mean, they're off by a bit. I mean, a $500 million price discrepancy, sales revenue discrepancy is not to be sneezed at. But again, you kind of made this bed, and now you kind of need to sleep in it. And this is also a part of the conversation where I don't really feel like Nvidia has ever properly been taken to task for some of the anti-competition moves that they've made in the marketplace. Remember when they tried to do their GeForce program where they would lock in developers and studios and PC builders? There was talk like, if you have a gaming line of products and you're a manufacturer of video cards or motherboards, that you couldn't make AMD products under that same level if you wanted all of the access and all of the resources of Nvidia for this GeForce program. Way back in the day, when Intel was doing similar things, AMD got like an anti-competition lawsuit started and not profited, but won a victory to the tune of billions of dollars that was then funneled into processor development around the Phenom architecture and Bulldozer architecture, and eventually resulted in, Ryzen and Threadripper. I mean, it took a long time. We're talking about a 10-year period, but it made AMD CPUs phenomenally competitive again. And I kind of feel like there should be some kind of market correction for Nvidia, because you can't be a techie and then say, oh, well, AMD needs to be more competitive, when Nvidia was actively trying to rig the game, right? You can't just be like, oh, no, AMD needs to make a better product at a third the price and then also give me foot massages. And if they can't do that, then I'll just keep buying Nvidia. Like, that's not how this works. Again, that's you coming up with a reason why you're still buying Nvidia, like I did. But that's not, real competition and an actual, justification. It is a justification. It's not like, oh, if it's a meritocracy. It's not a meritocracy. This is cutthroat corporate business, and I think Nvidia overstepped their bounds several times in how they did business with suppliers and manufacturers. So, yeah, I'll actively be looking personally for my own cache for the next generation of AMD GPUs as I kind of do refreshes to this workstation, because I hope this workstation is going to last for a while. But it's I'm not too sad about this announcement. I feel like Nvidia engaged in risky behavior and didn't have a good fallback position for if this risk didn't pay off. So I'll be curious to see. I'll be curious to see if this means that Nvidia GPUs are going to get some price breaks, or if they're going to get real aggressive about bundling. Like, you buy an RTX and you get 3 awesome new AAA games or something like that. I think we'll see some creative packaging and sales coming up soon, because it's not a good look when a company doesn't meet their financials and is sitting on stock while they're building stock. Again, if this is a fill quarter where they're manufacturing this stuff, you don't want to back off those manufacturing lines, but you don't want to be sitting on unsold product for too long. From Paco Street, insert GIF of wiping away tears with cash. From Steve DeRoche, hopefully AMD gets its stuff together and release a competing high-end GPU. Looking at you, Radeon 7. I mean, again, it's competing. What I think is frustrating is if everyone says, well, they don't have a competitor to the 2080 Ti, and then everyone just assumes that that's true of every tier of AMD's GPU roadmap. That's kind of what happened with Vega. Like, Vega is like, oh, it's a terrible deal against a 1080. And you're like, yeah, but all of their RX products were actually pretty price competitive for workload and for managing that mid-range. And then people still acted like, oh, AMD's just not competitive in this space. And then they actually got hit harder because their GPU compute was better for a lot of crypto. So I don't know. It's a mess. I'll be happy when we can kind of get back to some normalcy. The ramifications of Bitcoin on the gaming space are going to take years to calm back down again. But again, I know so many people, like, you're going to game just fine on a competitor to a 1060. Like, the 1080 I got was overkill for what I needed. I was just hoping for some longevity. But, I'm still mostly gaming at 1080p. I don't even have a higher resolution gaming monitor. I have a 4K display that I edit video on, and then a high refresh rate, a really fast Asus monitor that I game on. I actually, in this moment right now, I probably would have been fine with the 1060 too. I went 1080 because I wanted to buy once and have it last longer. It's fine. It's fine. It's not fine, but it's fine. Let's move on to another company that announced some troubling financials for mobile. There were a lot of articles about this, but I went straight to the LG newsroom instead because actually LG had a pretty good year. Excuse me. Overall, LG Electronics today announced record full-year revenues of, I'm doing the converted dollar amounts, for $54.4 billion US dollars. $54 billion in revenue, exceeding sales of 60 trillion won for the second year in a row. Full year profit, so profits of 2.4 billion, which increased nearly 10% year over year from 2017. Again, accounting the record profitability from appliances and home entertainment products. But if we scroll down to mobile, where's mobile? Here we go. The LG Mobile Communications Company reported 2018 revenues of $7 billion, with sales in the fourth quarter totaling $1.5 billion, an increase of 16% from the third quarter, although the full-year operating loss increased to $700 million. The mobile division's business structure showed improvement as a result of better material cost controls and overhead efficiencies based on the company's platform modularization strategy. In 2019, LG's mobile division will push 5G products and smartphones featuring different form factors while focusing on key markets where the LG brand remains strong. So, the overall company, $2.4 billion in profit, which is up year over year. LG Mobile took a $700 million loss. That's not great. but apparently was better than the year before, which completely makes sense to me given the roadmap and some of the sales numbers that I've seen moving from the LG G5 to the G6 to the G7. Because if I remember correctly, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong, that the initial quarter of sales for the LG G7 was actually pretty strong. Like that was a well-received, well-regarded phone, and we saw sales numbers climb, only to then, like, again, face some of the weird LG release strategy for the V40 later in the year, which got much more advertising in the United States than previous LG phones that I've been familiar with, but then had that weird fractured, so many regions around the world just never get the V series phones. And then they abandon their phones and they stop talking about their phones, and then they wonder why their phones like plummet in sales after a certain time period, and it kind of goes hand in hand. I'd love to see some data, like look at LG ad buys in the United States for everything, billboards, radio, television, internet ad buys, and then see if that correlates at all with LG sales. That when LG starts backing off on advertising, do their sales follow a similar downward trajectory from how they talk about their products? Because that, to me, is probably LG's biggest deficit against companies like Samsung and Apple. I don't think it has anything to do with the products themselves. I really do not believe that technology is a meritocracy anymore. That technology is a lifestyle-driven, consumer emotional attachment. And if you can't create some of that emotional desire, that emotional drive, then a consumer will be more likely to go with a brand that does. And it's not to say that Apple and Samsung don't make good products, but I don't think that their products are really genuinely better than the competition from LG or even from like Motorola, you know? HTC, that's another issue. I haven't really held an HTC since the U11. Actually, since anyway, I don't need to bash on HTC. But when we see like specialty and enthusiast phones starting to creep up and eat away at some of these little niche demographics and niche areas of different markets, LG, I think consistently their biggest problem has been messaging to the consumer and consistency with the consumer relationship. So the support you get from LG once that product is in your hands could definitely be improved too, from software updates to hardware issues like boot looping from way back in the day. But again, we're looking at LG, and I still think they're colored by the perception of their quality issues because they are not leading the discussion with their potential customers. If they were really driving home the conversation with potential customers, then I think we would have forgotten about boot looping as quickly as we've forgiven Samsung for batteries exploding on the Note 7. So that to me becomes the biggest fault here. So from the G6 on, there have been reports of some scattered issues with software updates. There was a recent software update for the G7, which in some regions created a boot loop, but wasn't a systemic hardware quality problem like the solder failing in the G4. This was a different situation. Or my personal issues with the G5. Like, it's one of the only phones from LG's catalog that I don't have because I went through 3 of them, and the one that still kind of worked, I gave back to Pocket now. It didn't need to be a part of my collection where I've got a Flex that still works, 2 Flex 2s that still work, a bunch of their mid-ranger phones. Like I've got a Stylo, I've got that rugged phone on AT&T, which is actually kind of a nice mid-ranger phone. It's a little overpriced, but it still gets the job done. I've got 2 G4s, both of them leatherback because those are amazing. But then I also do have a wood panel custom back for a G4. I obviously still have my G6. I'll never let go of my V10, which still works. My V20, which is still gangbusters. This is still an awesome baller monster multimedia phone. My V30 right here. And then what currently has my SIM card in it is my V40. The products are fine, and they offer unique benefits over the competition. And we almost never see advertisements from LG talking about what makes their product different or better than competitors. I think we all remember G7 commercials talking about Google Assistant, which is basically an advertisement for Google, which works just as well or probably better on a Pixel or a Samsung than it works on an LG. So why would you why would you buy an LG if you cared about Aubrey Plaza taking selfies with Google Assistant? Like, that makes zero sense. So this to me is the major problem. There are other things too. I mean, we could talk about individual components. Andrew Wallace has been a big advocate that V-series phones need to have bigger batteries. I agree. I don't think that really stops consumers from considering them, though. Like, the individual tech specs, I don't think weigh as heavily on a purchasing decision as an idea of what the product can do and attaching that feature or functionality to an emotion. It was not a big deal when Apple added water resistance to an iPhone until they came out with an amazing commercial that still gives me goosebumps about a bicyclist about to ride out into a rainstorm with an iPhone in his bicycle cradle. And you had AC/DC playing in the background as rain is torrenting down on this person. And you're like, oh, that totally drives the point home that iPhones are now water resistant. Or actually, it overinflates their probable actual water resistance rating, but it gets you keyed up and it gets you excited about it. The closest we got was a commercial for LG's boombox, where people are like those little robot cats that kind of nod or like bumping along to some song as someone puts the phone down. But it was very abstract and esoteric and like didn't really land the same kind of feeling or care for a sort of a fun addition feature, but not a true everyday consumer lifestyle feature. I'm waiting for the LG commercial that just starts out simply, do you like your ears? And then shows a speaker, the boombox mode, and then someone plugging in headphones and plugging in really nice headphones and talking about how those headphones are being properly driven by an amazing DAC and a phenomenal amp. And, again, just that challenge would cause a stir. Someone would look at that and my phone does just fine. My phone, and get real defensive about it. You kind of do want someone to kind of get rocked back on their heels with their current purchase. It's about creating a desire and using that desire to create a demand. But in terms of logistics, I am, again, I don't put a lot of stock into this rumor, but I really hope, this is what I hoped last year. We talked about this a lot on the Bored at Work podcast. I really feel we've gotten to the point where we shouldn't be separating the G series from the V series anymore. I really would like to see LG make a big little premium phone and release it at the beginning of the year, and then be done with their flagship offering early in the year, and then use the second half of the year to do something experimental or crazy or push boundaries. If they're going to do a foldable phone, because I know LG Display has some wicked, crazy screen tech that they've been sitting on for years, do that in the second half of the year, and don't compete against their main flagship phone offering at the beginning of the year. Or use the second half of the year to refine and deliver a good mid-ranger. Go up against a OnePlus T with an awesome mid-range, mid-pack budget solution. But the beginning of the year, do a V50 and V50 Mini, or a G8 and a G8 Plus, and make them the same, and make them the combination of all of the best ideas from the G and the V series together. So there is a rumor that we'll see a V50 and a G8 at the beginning, in the first half of 2019, and that some of this might be disclosed or detailed during MWC. That rumor I'm ranking super, super, super low. But that would make me very excited if LG were to pull something like that off. What would make me less excited is if we see a G8 and then like a V45. I don't like blurring the product lines. And I think the V30 suffered from, there was the V30, then the V30 Plus, and then AT&T opted for an exclusive here in the United States with a V35. And then that kind of got a wider distribution and a wider shipping. But that was not a smart strategy for LG, because it confused where were we? Because the V35 kind of became the notchless G7. Like, they were very similar in structure. Just the G7 had boombox and an LCD, while the V35 had OLED and no boombox and kind of a crappy speaker. Like, that doesn't help LG because it confuses the consumer base. So that's what I would hope to see. Stop pretending that there's a difference between a G and a V. Make them both the best of both of their ideas, and then go with a big little strategy like Samsung and Apple. A G8, G8 Plus. Done. And talk about, we had this amazing line, the V series, content creators, but you know what? We saw everyone wanted these features, so we're putting them together. It's not a compromise for one phone. It's the best of all of our great ideas in one platform for you guys. You have ad buys for the whole rest of the year, and you keep buying ads for the whole rest of the year because we know exactly what your flagship strategy is, and we're not going to guess in the second half of the year. We're not going to like, oh, what are they going to do for the next V? Like, we're done. That's it. And now we know what we're talking about for the rest of the year, what the competition's going to have to stack up against, and how we're going to compare against later in the year strategies. I would really love to see LG streamline and get on that conversation and focus it down. Aditya Anil. Someone get this man an LG sponsorship in King T'Challa's voice. I love it. I wish I was banking on that tasty LG cash. Sup Mushroom Soup. I loved my G2 back in the day. If only the software was closer to stock. I think, there are definitely concerns about stock, but the number one manufacturer in the world, Samsung, can't get much further away from stock, especially with their new revised UX, which their new UI is great. That is a great idea. It's something that I've been kind of mimicking on Nova Launcher for a while, is how do I get to a simpler, more streamlined interface that focuses the ergonomics on holding the phone and not moving the phone around as much. Again, not exactly the same, but I've gone to one home screen. I have, from the home screen, anywhere swipe up gets me my apps, anywhere swipe down gets me my notifications. I want this as simple and as clean as possible, so I don't have to move the phone to come up to swipe, and I don't have to move the phone to swipe. I don't have to reach for a gesture on a tall, skinny phone. I mean, I want as minimal interaction with my gadget as possible. And I have to give Samsung a lot of credit for addressing that on their current devices. But that's not stock. And even Google's implementation, I don't like as well. When you look at Pi and the Pixel 3, I don't think Google's cracked this nut. I don't think they've solved this problem. But the number 2 manufacturer in the world is Huawei, and we know that's nowhere near stock. So while software can definitely be a deal breaker for some people, I feel the emotional attachment for a lot of consumers is going to hinge on why does it cost so much and what can I do with it? And if you tell them, then I think you'll have better reasons to sell them a phone. And I think it keeps coming back to that. There is a reason Samsung and Apple are the number 1 and number 2 tech companies in mobile. Their products are good. Their ecosystem and support are good. But they also are the number 1 and the number 2 companies in terms of marketing dollars spent in most regions around the world. And Huawei, I would imagine, is climbing up that chain too, where they're meeting or probably exceeding in some areas targeted advertising at demographics that are most likely to buy their products. From Skylar Bond, I'm using my V40 for 3 years. I hope that I hope it lasts. I routinely kind of revisit my LG V20 just because I've still been holding to this hypothesis. If you have at least a Qualcomm 820, you are not suffering for performance and for power, and that you would still be doing fine. And it still keeps living up to that hypothesis. I really hope that the V30 and the V40 can have that kind of staying power. From Waris, Amir Muhammad, anyone remember the LG chocolate? I wanted one of those so bad. I never got a chocolate. That was such a sexy phone. From Abraham Artemis, tall aspect ratio on phones nowadays isn't that useful. IMO. I completely agree. And again, the Razer phone kind of highlights, I like forehead and chin bezels that have speakers built into them, and it actually makes things like playing games easier because the screen doesn't go right up to the edges. LG NV2 from Tech Leathercraft. I wanted one of those too. Actually, I think my sister had an Envy. I think she liked that. I can't remember. From Ronald Sims, the LG G7 is going to be my secondary phone. I think you could do way worse than having a G7 as your backup phone. I will probably never get my G7 back. When my wife smashed her Moto G5 S Plus LMNOP, I'm still going to replace the screen on that because I loved that little Moto G5. We're both on Project Fi now, and the G7 is the proper unlocked Fi edition of the G7. And so she just borrowed it. She's just borrowing it until we get her a replacement phone. But I'm probably never going to get that phone back. Let's see. From Fat Produce, LG really should switch to Android One fully. I don't know. I think Android still has a bunch of holes and a bunch of gaps. And from my experience using Android One on cheap hardware, no, it wasn't Android One. It was Android. What is the cheaper version of Android? Android Go or something like that. But anyway, I don't have a lot of faith in Google right now, and Android has issues, and I want manufacturers to solve those issues. You pick up EMUI on a Huawei. They make it a marketing claim, but the phones do live up to their performance claims that they tend to run smoother in my experience. And I'm talking about really using them. Like I load tons of apps. I fill their photo and video galleries with gigabytes and gigabytes of samples of photos and videos. I edit and render. Like everything that I would need to do to maintain the smoothest possible performance. That EMUI fixes a lot of the problems in Android that account for my poorer experiences on other manufacturers. Again, I would like to see continued and longer software support, but I also don't have a ton of faith in Google in delivering the best product and software support long term, especially when they're like, we've played this game in the past where there would be Google Play editions of phones, and then they kind of play with it, but then it's just a lot of work. I want that Microsoft relationship, though, where if Google's really going to stand by Android, maybe they just need to get after all of the core operating system improvements, bug fixes and patches and updates and upgrades, because there's no reason why 3 to 4 year old phones couldn't still be in rotation and operation today. It's just we would recommend against that now because we know that those phones aren't getting current software. G6 from Praneeth. G6 totally changed my mind on an LG, which was an awesome device. So, I mean, it's clear, like, there are a lot of things that I like about LG. The G2 was a shocking phone for screen to body ratio, having a huge battery for its time. It's still like, it's crazy when we look back and like, oh, the G2 was huge. It had a phablet screen. It was like a 5.2 inch screen. But the form factor on that was really exciting. The G3 was a little bit of a misstep. I liked the G3 a lot, but I think LG pushed a quad HD display on a chipset that really wasn't designed to drive it. The G4, I loved the G4, and I loved that they went with removable backs and leather backs, and the camera had great manual controls. It was an awesome phone, which then suffered boot looping problems. But, the G5 was definitely a dark day. Going from the G4 to the G5, we had a huge problem with manufacturing quality and then a terrible solution for accessorizing a phone. I don't think anyone would disagree with me. It's probably the harshest I've been to any phone while actively holding it and reviewing it from a manufacturer I like a lot. And for how many times that phone died on me, it was not a good phone, an individual gadget, and it was a terrible platform. And like you, Praneeth, for any fears or considerations that I had of LG figuring stuff out, the G6 was a high watermark. It is still a high watermark for a very practical design. I like this way better than curved or rounded glass, flat edges, flat sides. It's nicer to hold. It's easier to hold on to. I wish mine had the quad DAC. It does not have the quad DAC. But this has become... I hate saying this. This is going to sound like such first world douchebaggery, but this is my daughter's phone. So we pack this full of movies on a memory card, and when we travel, I now hook her up with some nice Bluetooth headphones, and this is what she watches Dora the Explorer and Incredibles on when we travel. I have a little GorillaPod stand and clamp, and it's silly, but my daughter's really well teched out, so don't judge me. Lots of other conversation about LG. Sorry, I went down that well again, but to me, it's I think there's still any opportunity for a manufacturer to break through, and especially right now with the top players, Apple and Samsung, facing that high-priced consumer backlash. Give me a G8. See if you can target that $800 price point against Samsung pricing likely a little higher. The LCDs on LGs are not a deal breaker if you need to cut some costs. The quad pixel in an LG is excellent. That G7 is super bright, detailed, crisp. It's a high quality display. Keep up with the ultra wide camera. Give me the quad DAC, and you could stand to improve on software support, but advertise the crap out of it and continue to be a presence in your consumers' lives, in your customers' lives, and you will do far better year over year from where we were in 2018. I'm a hardware guy, so I like talking about hardware, but it does become a bummer when there are a lot of people in my circles of family and friends who I don't think LG phones would be the right fit for because of some of their software issues. So, speaking of companies who have this kind of fervent consumer response and are lifestyle brands and would never do anything to harm the consumer experience in pursuit of selling more products. They would never fall prey to the fallacy of planned obsolescence. Comes this ridiculous editorial from the Register. Now, this is a story that's been covered a lot, but I like that they put a little bit more attitude on their coverage of Apple. This is from Personal Tech, written by Kieran McCarthy. Apple, you can't sue us for slowing down your iPhones because you invited us into your home. We can explain. Yeah. So, we were talking the year before and last year about Apple and battery throttling. Apple used software updates to degrade the performance of your phone under the auspices of them saying it was to counteract the degradation of the battery cell. But they also didn't really alert consumers that that's what was happening when those new iOS updates were coming out. And again, there was that perception of new software's coming out, and now my phone doesn't run as well. And, it's right around the time that I'd be upgrading, so maybe I should just buy a new phone. And this is further reinforced by the fact that last year there was a less expensive battery replacement program, cutting costs from $80 from a battery replacement to $30 for a battery replacement. I did one on my iPhone SE. It runs like butter, and in many of the things that I use my phone for can still hang with, if not outperform, my iPhone XS. The fact that Apple posted, missed earnings, missed sales, missed expectations for the last year, especially after the launch of the iPhone XS, XS Max, and XR, kind of points to the fact they actually said part of the reason why they didn't sell as many new phones was because people were maintaining and repairing their old phones, which as soon as they would get a better battery, wouldn't you know it, the performance is back. It's like I've got a brand new phone all over again. It only cost me $30. So, a lot of the media has kind of taken that to be the end of the battery throttling debacle. But this part of iOS still exists where after about a year, your phone gets put on a list and then the consumer has to sort of actively manage battery health, battery throttling, performance degradation. It's in the settings now, so it's now you're alerted to that, but not really. Like Apple doesn't really pop up on your phone, hey, you just updated to iPhone 12.2. By the way, we're going to throttle your phone. Because we did not put in a large enough battery for the battery to wear out over 2 years. If you don't want your phone to just randomly crash, then we need to scale back the performance of your phone. I don't know why that doesn't get bigger conversation, that a phone that costs $1,000 doesn't have a battery big enough to weather the expected charge-recharge cycle and degradation over, say, a 2-year period. But again, not really what we're addressing here. So while the media has largely said that, this situation is pretty much done, no, there's still legal action pertaining to this. There's still a sort of a consumer protection and regulatory interest in examining the situation that Apple has with their customers and that how they did business over years, from like the iPhone 5 to the iPhone 7, iPhone 8. That's the time period we started really talking about battery throttling. That maybe there should also be some kind of corrective issue. And then also, what are the rights of the consumers? Because Apple did this really nice thing, this really altruistic thing in still charging you to replace the battery. But does that mean that their actions now negate the potential for a class action lawsuit? And Apple's defense is kind of dumb, that because you buy certain licenses and agree in the end user licensing agreement to a certain kind of relationship with Apple, that, and this is their defense, I'm kind of summarizing it, not elegantly, but, I'm not making this up. I'm not, let me go to part of the article here, because they talk about contractors, which is hilarious. Addressing a bunch of people trying to sue it for damages, the iGiant's lawyers told a California court this month, plaintiffs are like homeowners who have let a building contractor into their homes to upgrade their kitchens, thus giving permission for the contractor to demolish and change parts of the houses. And they go on. Any claim that the contractor caused excessive damage in the process sounds in contract, not trespass. That's the dumbest argument I've ever heard. Again, there is that like spark of legalese that helps this sound like kind of a legitimate argument that Apple has access to your device and they can kind of augment or influence or degrade performance on your phone and not tell you. But it's also like their analogy just doesn't work. Like, I'm doing business with a contractor and I'm just never going to look at the work that the contractor is doing. And then they blew up part of my kitchen to put in like a dinette set. Like, it doesn't work that way. And no one thinks that it should work that way. But also it's, I've got to find this other part of the article. I've got to find this because it's also pertaining to the battery situation. In that also in their arguments, Apple says, quote, Apple had no duty to disclose the facts regarding software capability and battery capacity. So not only are they a contractor in your kitchen knocking down walls and blowing up stoves, they don't have to tell you that that's what they're going to do. While I also remind us that numerous stories that we've covered on this podcast have pointed to things like right to repair. Last week, we talked about some great victories for the right to repair movement, while also Apple continuing to be one of the lead voices in opposition to a consumer being allowed to repair their own gadget or seek out third-party repairs from other electronic stores. Like if they don't want to take their phone to a Genius Bar, that they should have the legal right to go to another outlet that can source the appropriate repair parts to fix their products. It's just like, again, Apple deliberately kept all of this quiet. And probably profited for years of consumer activity from people like, oh, my phone's slow. I need to get a new phone, when their old phones would have lasted just fine. And now they're actively arguing against any kind of corrective action for that behavior, that they're in the right, that consumers understood this relationship, and that Apple didn't need to explain the relationship that consumers obviously understood. Terrible. Yolanda wrote, to that I call bull feathers. Asterisk. So frustrating. Some other people just bringing up HTC in this conversation too. I don't know. We need to drag them into this conversation right now. Aditya Anil, wasn't there an OEM that made the phone learning the charging habits and then determine the rate of charge based on that? Slow during the usual hours and fast during irregular ones. Oh, that maybe was part of the conversation. I think HTC did have something like that. Qualcomm's quick charge, the power delivery spec, all of these things just sort of point to different avenues into how to inject electricity into chemical cells in a way that doesn't blow up the consumer. I mean, just more than anything else, if you don't have a good process for making the battery consumer replaceable, then I think it needs to be kind of disclosed, like what the financial obligation, like we have Energy Star appliances, and you buy a new fridge, and then a big label on the fridge says you can expect this type of cost per year in operation under normal situations. I kind of feel like an iPhone needs a big sticker on the box. The battery capacity for this product, when charged regularly over this period of time, should degrade this much over the amount of time that you might own this product. Because if we're going to complain about LG not putting in big enough batteries, we definitely need to complain about Apple not putting in big enough batteries, because they still have a CPU throttling program built into iOS, because after about 2 years, Apple expects that your phone will start to perform radically inconsistently as you start to get to the lower capacity of a battery. That's not long enough. It needs to be longer. So, let's see. Real quick, I want to cover these two stories. I don't like dragging YouTube drama into the mix because it personally affects me. I become a part of the story, and I don't like becoming a part of the story. But YouTube apparently thinks that there's a big problem that they can help address, and they're going to start taking action to fixing the situation, and that's dislikes. You know what? People can be really mean, and a lot of people might dislike a video, and they're a mob, and they're going to start finding ways to stop weaponizing the dislike button. This is an article from The Verge from Julia Alexander. YouTube is no stranger to viewers weaponizing the dislike button, as seen by the company's recent Rewind video, but the product development team is working on a way to tackle the issue. Tom Leung, director of project management at YouTube, addressed the issue of dislike mobs in a recent issue of Creator Insider, YouTube's corporate series for creators. So, there's obviously a community of people, often on services like Reddit, that if they see something they don't like, encourage a level of interaction and behavior that will then go out and try and nuke something that they don't like. If it's a movie trailer, if it's a rewind video, I mean, nothing's really sacred on the internet, and that sucks. I appreciate that YouTube has concerns, because that is something which would definitely impact the viability of YouTube as a platform for larger corporate entities. When a movie trailer comes out and it's radically unpopular, and that gets like nuked into oblivion with dislike, thumbs downs, and negative comments, we start to see different tools employed for managing dislikes and for managing comments on those types of videos. I don't have access to those types of protective corporate infrastructure tools on my videos. If I put out a video that's controversial, people just dislike it and tell me I'm an idiot, and then I kind of have to get on with my day. So it makes sense to me that this would be a very a primary action item for YouTube, something very important to examine the situation and protect these darling content creators from meanies on the internet who do terrible things like disliking videos. Oh, God. But what YouTube hasn't been very public about was a story last week that broke literally minutes after I was done with last week's podcast. A series of content creators who are literally getting extorted with copyright strikes. YouTube's copyright system is so broken and so lopsided, and YouTube refuses to play any active role in moderating or facilitating conversation between creators and copyright holders, that it is now literally being used for extortion. 2 YouTubers spoke up publicly, and we don't know how many other people may have been affected. But basically, a company managed to become a part of this YouTube copyright system, because YouTube doesn't do this. This is as far as YouTube's concerned, they get to keep their hands clean and their hands off, where they can strike a video. So there are a couple different tiers. If I make a movie review show, chances are very high that I'm just going to get a notification from YouTube that I had copyrighted content in my video, and that the copyright holder is just going to monetize my video and take whatever ad revenue I might have generated. And that's why a lot of like movie reviewers are kind of moving over into like, crowdfunding and Patreon style subscription services, because like anytime you see ads on a video like that, the monies are likely not going to the content creator. That's kind of become the standard operating procedure. Some people, if they're a much, much bigger channel and YouTube doesn't want to piss off someone with a lot of clout on their platform, they might push a little bit harder for some sort of shared or distributed financials, or some other way of promoting commentary and critique and free and fair use. Most of the people who produce content on YouTube, though, I feel do not actually fall under fair use in how they source clips, how they utilize clips. It's usually not transformative. It's often barely educational or demonstrative of what it is that they're trying to talk about. Like, oh, this video and blah, 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 blah. And this movie I thought was great. And then it's a clip of the movie. And then I thought the characters were awesome. And then it's like an unrelated clip of the movie. And then so-and-so does this. And then it's like a clip of a completely unrelated TV show or movie to be the punchline of a joke that's not really very funny. None of that is really fair use. If you're using something that's copyrighted, if you're using someone else's intellectual property, it's got to be very specific. It's not just an amount. It's not like I made a 30-minute video and less than 3 minutes of it were copyrighted content from someone else. That doesn't matter. Any frame of someone else's content being used not for transformative or for illustrative or discussed as a commentary or critique is technically actionable. Your defense in court is fair use. There is no such thing as fair use being a preventative measure from getting sued or from being removed from another platform. There's a great book. I mean, the people who wrote the book on fair use for commentary and critique, I can't remember the name of the lawyers now. We had them on retainer when we were producing our movie review show 10 years ago. Oh my God, Movies You May Have Missed was 10 years ago. I feel so old right now. But we, Donaldson Califf, on fair use for documentary films, I think is the name of the book. I could be wrong. But my wife has it in her bookcase in the bedroom right over there, because it's an amazing book if you really like to dig into this kind of stuff. But yeah, most of the people operating on YouTube would not have a good fair use claim if they were actually trotted out in front of a judge. But YouTube can't really be a part of all of this. So there's this huge hands-off problem with YouTube basically giving copyright, the IP holders, all of the power. So in that scenario, I make a movie review. I put in a clip of the movie. It's automatically flagged by a content ID system. And then I can challenge it. When I challenge it, YouTube takes my message saying I'm challenging this. I believe I am operating in fair use, that I am providing good commentary and good critique of this product, specifically referencing why I'm using the clip I'm using. And they just send it to the IP holder, and then the IP holder decides if I'm correct or incorrect. Which means if it's my channel, 80,000 subscribers on YouTube, it's a guaranteed no. No, they're not going to do anything. They're going to keep this the copyright identification in place, and they're going to profit from my ad revenue. And then if I push it with YouTube, then it becomes a potential for a strike. But the IP holder is the one who decides. Now, if my channel had like 5 million subscribers and I made a lot of noise and I got my fan base all riled up and I started talking about boycotting the studio's products, well, then that IP holder would have some better incentive to take off that copyright strike and let me profit from the work of making a video about their movie. That's the way that justice works on YouTube. It's way less common and it's way less seen that an IP holder will go directly to a strike. So they're saying there is actual damage being done to the intellectual property that I hold, and YouTube needs to actively punish the content creator who is utilizing our IP illegally. If you get one strike on your channel, you start losing benefits and you start losing access to certain YouTube services. If you get 3 strikes on your channel, you lose your channel. YouTube has run this on autopilot that now a company and potentially other companies, because we just don't know, will now approach a smaller content creator, immediately drop 2 copyright strikes on this creator for specious reasons, and then say, if you don't pay us a certain amount of money, if you don't kick us some cash on PayPal, which was dumb on their part because you can track PayPal, or you don't kick us some funds over on Bitcoin, then we're going to send your 3rd strike, and Google and YouTube are going to remove your channel. And YouTube can't really do anything about this. The entire platform and the automation of this process has been built in a way that YouTube can keep their hands clean and they don't need to get directly involved in every little dispute. But now we're seeing at least one company weaponizing the service for their own nefarious ends. And of course, like there was a lot of noise on Reddit, and some people were tweeting about it. I tweeted about it, and then YouTube quietly did, oh, well, we're looking into the specifics of this particular case, and we'll be working with the individuals involved to make sure that there's an equitable outcome for all parties involved. It's broken. It's legit proper broken. There is no like holding or escrow. You know, if a company says like, oh, you're unfairly using our copyright or our IP, then they shouldn't just get the ad revenue from the content creator. It should go into a bucket, and then there should be some sort of arbitration process. If the content creator thinks that they've got a better argument, that then there can be some sort of dialogue. But this is the system that YouTube had to create in light of the whole Viacom situation of IP being put up on YouTube, so that you can't go after Google as the platform. You can't go after YouTube, but you can go after YouTube content creators. It's kind of like file sharing way back in the day. Technically, Napster you could go after, because Napster had a different organization and file structure for disseminating and distributing IP, but then you got to like Kazaa. You couldn't really sue Kazaa with the laws that we had at the time, so we saw Lars Ulrich out there suing fans for distributing music. So you went after the individuals. Same thing here. You can't really go after YouTube the way they've structured this. They're ignorant of what goes on with their platform, but you can go after content creators. If we can't, you see, the beauty of this for major corporations is it never comes back to them. There is technically a way to file a false DMCA violation. So I use something in fair use. I am well protected. I'm well within my rights. Technically, this process should protect me. And if someone files a DMCA takedown request against me and it's fraudulent, that then I can go after them. The reality of that situation is if I am perfectly legally within my rights, no lawyer is going to take that case going up against a major media holder. Like, if I want to go up against Disney, no one's going to take that case. I would have to fund my legal defense against Disney and then also fund my legal attack against Disney for their fraudulent DMCA. That's never going to happen. You're never going to have that support. That's never going to be a tool we have access to. But we should expect YouTube to have some better kind of arbitration process where if someone's throwing out fake DMCA violations, DMCA takedowns, and copyright strikes, that there's a way to punish that company. We've seen this also in the music industry where several music labels and recording labels have gone after smaller producers releasing content around the same time as some of their artists and filing takedown notices and takedown requests, fraudulent DMCA violations. But, there's nothing YouTube can do. You just can't fix it. Fixing it would require some kind of strategy which wouldn't immediately be beneficial to major studios, major copyright and IP holders. Just nothing we can do. Just can't work. So it's a very sad state of affairs on the YouTubes right now. I recently went through this myself, not with a copyright strike, but there's a beautiful piece of Bach piano recording that I was going to use in talking about Bluetooth and audio codecs. It was released Creative Commons 0, which is essentially the modern day version of public domain. That it's completely free and free, like, you download it for free, and then free as in there are no rights or restrictions attached to it. But someone claimed it on YouTube, so I can't use it. I was going to demonstrate some of the audio and quality differences between LDAC and aptX, and you can hear like AAC degradation versus SBC audio codecs, and you can actually demonstrate that by how much audio is actually being removed from the source file. Like, it's not perfect, it's not science, but you can get a sense of it. Can't do it. And it took, I sent in my, you can't claim this music, it's public domain, it's Creative Commons 0, and I didn't get a reply. So there, I was happy that I put up a test video because I've run into this a lot. So I put up a test video, it instantly gets flagged, and then I send off a submission to the people who claim to hold this copyright. Nothing they can do. They can't help me. They own the copyright to this work that can't be copyrighted. So I guess you're just SOL. Sorry. That's just them's the breaks. So yeah, something is fundamentally broken here. Something's rotten in the state of Denmark. It's not going to get fixed because there's too much money involved. One last story. I'm not well read on this story. I'm trying to catch up on this story. I'm mostly talking about it because I hope you will go and read the article that I'll have linked in the show notes on this, and then we'll wrap up this whole podcast because I'm already running long. Bloomberg Business. This is a very interesting, nay, exciting piece of investigative journalism. Huawei Sting offers rare glimpse of the U.S. targeting a Chinese giant. This is a terrible headline for what could almost be a fascinating business thriller. Let me get back into the article, and then I'll editorialize on top of it. Diamond glass could make your phone screen nearly unbreakable, and its inventor says the FBI enlisted him after Huawei tried to steal his secrets. Again, not a good summation because this is a fascinating story. Okay. This is from Eric Schatzker at Bloomberg Business. Does a very good job of writing this up. Bloomberg's editorial team, I think, has done a terrible job of making this social media titling clickbaity. The sample looked like an ordinary piece of glass, 4 inches square and transparent on both sides. It had been packed like the precious specimen its inventor, Adam Kahn, believed it to be, placed on wax paper, nestled in a tray lined with silicone gel, enclosed in a plastic case surrounded by airbags, sealed in a cardboard box, and then sent for testing to a laboratory in San Diego owned by Huawei Technologies Company. But when the sample came back last August, months late and badly damaged, Khan knew something was terribly wrong. Was the Chinese company trying to steal his technology? The glass was a prototype for what Khan's company, Akan Semiconductor Incorporated, describes as a nearly indestructible smartphone screen. Khan's innovation was figuring out how to coat one side of the glass with a micro-thin layer of artificial diamond. He hoped to license this technology to phone manufacturers, which could use it to develop an entirely new, super durable generation of electronics. Khan says Mirage Diamond Glass, as the product is known, is 6 times stronger and 10 times more scratch resistant than Gorilla Glass, the industry standard that generates about $3 billion in annual sales for Corning Incorporated. Lighter, thinner, faster, stronger, says Khan, in full sales mode. Mirage, he promises, will lead to a fundamental next level in design. So, I want you to read this article, and I want you to share this article, and I want you to comment on this article. Khan is this is a startup. Mirage is a very small manufacturing base looking for a potential big ticket client, maybe a Samsung, maybe an Apple, a Huawei would not suck. And then the story continues to unfold where this type of micro coating technology has some security and defense implications. Like there could be application of this kind of technology in the defense industry. That there could be a potential violation in shipping samples, that because there is the potential for a defense application, that samples of this product should not be legally allowed to leave the United States, but where Huawei did their testing back in China when they promised that they would keep it in San Diego, that the sample had been cracked and broken when they asserted that they would not damage the sample in any way, because if you crack this open, you could be trying to scan how this micro layer was achieved, that they shot at it with an amazingly powerful laser to get that done, and then still held business meetings with this potential manufacturer, the scientist, the developer of this process at CES while he was wiretapped by the FBI. And we're now at that point of we don't know where this goes next, if there are going to be charges filed, if there's going to be any other kind of investigation. Obviously, the FBI isn't just showing all their cards for something like this, but the impact and the ramifications of this are very, very broad and far-reaching for how businesses are going to conduct themselves and do business in the future, especially as a number of Chinese companies have not so great reputations about taking other companies' IP, copying it, stealing it, sharing it, selling it. Now we're going to see probably a much broader law enforcement initiative in how those companies do business in the United States. So this is a fascinating read. And it's kind of incredible what Akan went through. And also just a little bit of exciting that we, unfortunately for Akan, get a sneak peek at a potential quality of life technology, which could be amazing. I am still so sorely disappointed that we haven't seen more exotic mineral work being used in phone screens. Gorilla Glass is not that great. It's not. I have a Kyocera over there with a sapphire display, which survived getting raked against crumbling concrete. The sides of that phone are gouged and chipped. You can find it on my YouTube channel. Like, I take a hunk of concrete and it is breaking as I rake it across this screen, and there is no damage on that display. That we haven't seen more manufacturers, like Apple played with sapphire as a lens cover on the camera, but why wouldn't they just make the screen of their phone out of something like sapphire for their premium, super expensive phones and help save the consumer some cash? And of course, you can have some of those conversations. Sapphire is a little bit more brittle while it's also harder against those types of breaks, but now we're looking at micro coatings, which would solve those problems. You have layers of some material that are a little bit more shock resistant and layers of material that are more scratch resistant. And now, rather than sticking with sapphire, which is one of the hardest minerals, we're going to diamond. So I am ridiculously excited about not using just some sort of chemically treated glass and going straight to much harder, denser, stronger material. It just sucks because this Mirage Diamond Glass still hasn't locked their manufacturer. You know, again, you were hoping, like, you sell this off as an exclusive. Like, Samsung picks this up on their foldable screens or something like that, you know, like a wedge design or something. And that becomes a big ticket, desirable selling point for a brand like Samsung. We've tested this. It's 6 times harder and stronger than Gorilla Glass. You know, we want your phones to be more durable. And especially we made the back of the phone out of this material, so you don't have to worry as much about breaking both sides of your phone if you drop it. You know, you don't need to use a case with our super awesome Mirage Diamond Glass. But now their product is caught up in this FBI investigation, which means it's probably a little bit more likely that manufacturers won't rush to get involved with this product, which sucks that we're going to be kind of sidelined on what could be an exciting new technology. From a DT Anil, harder, better, faster, stronger. I was the same thing. I immediately thought, like, oh man, he's really pitching some Daft Punk with his sales there. It's pretty great. Ziggity Zooty. Wait, you want iPhone users to throw away those expensive AF screens? So yeah, I'll obviously I'll have this article linked. But if you go to Bloomberg Business and you search for Huawei Sting offers rare glimpse of the U.S. targeting a Chinese giant, that's not really, like, targeting makes this sound like the U.S. is picking on Huawei. Excuse me, sorry, I've got like an itch on my nose and it's super gross. It looks like I'm picking my nose, but I'm not. It looks like the U.S. is like targeting China. This is kind of, if this situation pans out, like if what this developer's claims are true, then this is a situation worthy of investigation. And like I feel like Huawei Sting offers rare glimpse of the U.S. investigating a Chinese giant is more fair to what law enforcement might be engaged with. But then again, Bloomberg isn't probably getting those international clicks like they want on their articles. So I'm hoping that you'll read the article despite the terrible headline and byline on this article, because they're not very good. So I think it's about that time. I think we should wrap this up. From LGH Dotma, is an interview with someone who's involved in development achievable? Probably not from me. Again, when we start getting into international politics, I don't know that anyone would look at my channel as being a big enough resource for me to interview them and not worry about any potential fallout, political issues, legal issues. I mean, I could reach out. Let me reach out. I'll see if I could get in touch with someone at this semiconductor business. And they are apparently based on the West Coast. So I would just be interested in taking a look at their manufacturing and like what their samples are capable of in kind of that Corning way. Like maybe they'll let me throw a ball bearing at it or something. But I seriously doubt anyone would look at me seriously and say like, oh, well, we want him to interview us and ask tough questions. And then we might potentially end up divulging legal information that we shouldn't on some douchebag's YouTube channel. Some hypothetical douchebag, not me. I'm not calling myself a douchebag because I'm pretty awesome. But yeah, so you know what? I will. LGH, I will reach out, but I'm seriously doubtful that they'll look at my body of work and say, yeah, we want to talk to that guy. So yes, I think it's time. We should wrap this up. I gotta shoot. I have videos coming out this week, and I have a ton of editing and B-roll to capture, so I'm gonna go jump on that. I do want to put out that little plug again. I just had a phenomenal chat last week. We did our first state of the Patreon on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. Did a live stream. Great conversation with some of the members of that community. The video's gotten a little bit more traction just with members of that community talking about where we're going to go, future content, new perks, new goals, some improvements to production, the possibility of me bringing on another editor or maybe another producer, or at least like some kind of like line producer, someone like that to get some more not only more content out there, but higher quality content out there. And then just some of the issues that we've run into in the past. Like I had to detail and break down some of the contests that we'd run and some of the initiatives that make sense for where this channel and where the Patreon can go to. So if you're inclined to check something like that out, it's proving to be a phenomenal resource and a phenomenal group of people that are interested in this kind of discussion, and they help me almost every day in making the videos and making the products that I like to share publicly with everybody. So I have to throw them a huge thumbs up and a huge shout out of glory, because I literally, figuratively and literally, would not and could not be doing this without them, the folks over at patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. All right. Be on the lookout for some embargoed videos coming out soon. Be on the lookout for some more headphone reviews, for more audio reviews. And as soon as I get some sunny days in Southern California, we're going to get back to Razer Phone 2. The phone that supposedly has like the worstest camera ever, which has been doing me just fine if you catch some of the samples that I've shared on Instagram. Instagram.com/SomeGadgetGuy. All right, folks, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, on the Instagrams, the Twitters, and the Facebooks at SomeGadgetGuy. And you also know that you can come back here on whatever streaming service, probably YouTube, that you watch this on. But if you want to watch this on a Periscope or something else, it's probably there too, where we're going to do another chat, Monday morning tech chat. I love starting my week off with you fine guys and gals and tech fans of all persuasions. And be back next Monday. We're going to talk about more news. We're going to talk about more tech, more fun stuff. We're going to start building into more of these MWC lead-ups, rumors. I'm hoping we'll get some good pre-brief information out there. Maybe some companies trying to do something bold and daring. Definitely talk about some of those rumors coming up before we get to the big show. I'm not going to Barcelona because I've got to stay and help Newegg, but I'll be paying a lot of attention and hopefully getting my hands on some cool stuff after they're announced. So hopefully be on the lookout for that too. So folks, I want you all to have a phenomenal week. I want you to have an amazing week. Do cool things with your technology, but just do cool things in general. And I will catch you next week here on the SGGQA podcast for the Monday Morning Tech Chat show. Be great, be awesome, be amazing. I love you all. I'll catch you next time. Take care.